There's a specific kind of silence that falls over the mountains in Montana right before a storm rolls in. It's heavy, electric, and it makes the hair on your arms stand up. And that's exactly what it felt like at 5:30 in the morning when the pounding started on my cabin door. I was sitting there, nursing a cup of black coffee that had gone lukewarm about 10 minutes prior, just watching the steam curl off the top, trying to enjoy the stillness of Whisper Ridge, but then came the noise, aggressive, entitled, the kind of knocking that doesn't ask for permission but demands submission. I didn't jump, didn't spill a drop. I just watched the security monitor mounted under my cabinet, staring at the two men standing on my porch in uniforms that looked official from a distance but fell apart the second you zoomed in. See, 20 years in the Bureau teaches you to spot the details that don't fit, the glitches in the matrix, and these two were glitching hard. Their posture was all wrong, too stiff, too rehearsed, like actors trying to remember their blocking, and the tall one, let's call him Officer Duffy, kept adjusting his belt like it was buying him time to find his courage. I walked to the door, not because I was scared, but because I was curious, slipping into the persona I'd been crafting for 8 weeks. Jack Miller, the retired actuary, the guy who moved to the middle of nowhere to die of boredom and bad weather. I opened the door just a crack, leaving the chain on, and the cold mountain air rushed in, smelling of pine and impending stupidity. "Get out here, Miller," the shorter one barked, trying to deepen his voice into something threatening. HOA enforcement doesn't ask twice. He shoved a piece of paper through the crack, nearly taking my eye out, and I took it, scanning the document with the slow, trembling hands of a terrified civilian, while my eyes, the real eyes behind the act, dissected everything. It was a citation for unauthorized pigment variants, claiming my cabin's exterior stain was sienna clay when the approved palette was clearly russet earth. And the fine, you're going to laugh at this, was $15,000, payable within 48 hours or they'd initiate property seizure protocols. I looked up at them, widening my eyes, letting my lower lip quiver just a fraction, and asked, "Do you gentlemen have a warrant for this?" That was the test, the litmus strip dipping into the acid, and they failed it beautifully. The tall one blinked, actually took a half step back, and his hand drifted toward the body cam on his chest, which I knew wasn't a standard issue Axon, but a cheap knockoff you can buy on Amazon. And he stammered, "W warrants are for criminal matters. This is a community compliance issue, Mr. Miller, and under Article 9 of the Whisper Ridge Charter, we have absolute jurisdiction." It was the rehearsed line, the script they'd been fed, but underneath the bluster, I saw it. Terror. Pure, unadulterated fear, and not of me. No, they weren't scared of the guy in the flannel pajamas. They were terrified of the person who sent them. "We'll be back," the short one hissed, leaning in close enough that I could smell the stale donuts and anxiety on his breath. "And next time, we're bringing Mrs. Sterling, and you do not want to be the reason she has to come down the mountain." Mrs. Sterling. Evelyn Sterling. The name hung in the air like smoke even after they scrambled back into their black SUV and peeled out on the gravel. And as I watched them go, I felt that familiar cold switch flip in my chest, the one that turns off the empathy and turns on the predator. I closed the door, locked it, and held the citation up to the light, running my thumb over the embossed seal until I felt it. A tiny, rigid lump in the paper, a listening device, microtech, expensive stuff, definitely not something a neighborhood watch picks up at Best Buy. I didn't crush it. I didn't flush it. I set it gently on the kitchen counter, right next to the sugar bowl, and whispered, loud and clear, "Evelyn, loud and clear." This wasn't just a scam, folks. This was a kingdom, a little feudal state carved out of the American wilderness where one woman had decided that the Constitution stopped at the gatehouse, and her word was the only law that mattered. For 8 weeks I'd been watching, documenting, listening to the stories of families who lost their life savings, elderly couples evicted over grass height, young parents terrorized by these fake cops until they just handed over the keys and fled. They thought I was their next victim, the isolated old man in cabin 47, easy pickings, fresh meat for the grinder. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that the fear they saw in my eyes was just a reflection of what was coming for them. I spent the rest of the morning in what I like to call active waiting, which basically involves drinking more coffee and setting a trap that would make a spider jealous. I pulled out my laptop, Not the personal one with the photos of my niece and my fishing trips, but the honey pot, a customized rig issued by the Bureau's cyber division, loaded with enough tracking malware to map the neural network of a small country. I left it on the dining table, lid open, screen glowing with a fake bank login page, just tempting enough to be irresistible. Through the window, using my high-powered optics, I spotted her, Sheila, Sterling's right-hand woman, pacing on her deck 3 cabins down, talking into her phone with frantic, choppy gestures. I swung the directional mic toward her, adjusting the gain until her voice cut through the static in my earpiece. He asked about a warrant, Evelyn. He used the word warrant, she was saying, her voice pitching up into hysteria. He's not folding like the others. No, I don't think he's a lawyer. He dresses like a lumberjack. Yes, ma'am. I understand. Tomorrow? But the optics. Okay, I'll prep the team. She hung up and looked at her phone like it was a live grenade, and that's when I knew the timeline had accelerated. They weren't going to wait 48 hours. They were coming for me tomorrow. The night is long when you're waiting for a kidnapping, let me tell you. I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the status LEDs on my encrypted sat phone as I uploaded the day's audio files to the server in Denver. The response from my handler was short and sweet. Green light on phase 2. Do not break cover until they cross the federal line. Be safe, Jack. The federal line meant kidnapping. Extortion is bad, fraud is terrible, but physically snatching a human being against their will? That's the golden ticket. That's the charge that puts you in a federal supermax until the sun burns out. I slept in my clothes, boots laced, sidearm tucked into the hidden holster in the small of my back, though I knew I couldn't use it. Not yet. I had to let them win. I had to let them take me. Do you have any idea how hard it is to train your body to lose? To suppress 20 years of combat instincts that scream, strike first, when a threat walks through the door? The next morning, at 9 a.m. sharp, the black SUV returned, but this time it brought friends. 3 of them. The 2 stooges from yesterday, plus a slab of meat named Brutus, or at least that's what I named him in my head, who looked like he was carved out of granite and steroids. They didn't knock. They kicked the door in. Wood splintered, glass shattered, and they swarmed into my living room with zip ties and tasers drawn, shouting commands that were a mix of police procedural and action movie cliches. Hands where I can see them. On the ground. Now, Brutus bellowed, advancing on me. I raised my hands, trembling just the right amount, playing the part of the confused senior citizen. What is this? What are you doing? I have rights. I stammered, backing into the kitchen counter. Your rights are suspended pending the tribunal hearing, Duffy announced, looking much braver now that he had backup. You have been deemed a threat to community cohesion. Community cohesion. That's what they called it when you didn't pay the 15 grand. They grabbed me, rougher than necessary, twisting my arms behind my back and cinching the zip ties tight, but not tight enough. See, amateurs always zip tie the wrists parallel, bone to bone, which leaves a gap. A pro crosses the wrists. I flexed my forearms, creating a pocket of air, ensuring that when the time came, I could snap these plastic bracelets like dried pasta. They dragged me out of the cabin, and there was Sheila, standing by the driveway with a professional video camera, filming the whole thing. Mr. Miller is being escorted to the community center for a compliance review, she narrated to the empty street, building their fake evidence trail, documenting their own felony. I looked right into the lens, gave a pathetic little whimper, and let them shove me into the back of the SUV. The interior was a cage, metal grate between the front and back, doors stripped of handles, windows blackened. As we rolled down the mountain, I wasn't praying, I was counting. I was memorizing turns, estimating speed, tracking the elevation changes in my ears. We passed through the main gate, then turned onto a private road I'd only seen on satellite maps, a winding gravel path that led deep into the National Forest Buffer Zone. This was where the money went. We passed security checkpoints that were manned by guys holding AR-15s, real ones this time. And finally, the trees opened up to reveal it, a citadel. It was a mansion that tried too hard to be a castle, stone turrets, massive oak doors, manicured gardens that had no business existing at this altitude. It was beautiful, and it was paid for by the misery of 4 dozen families. They hauled me out, Brutus gripping my bicep like a vice, and marched me through the grand foyer, past marble statues and oil paintings, into what used to be a ballroom, but had been converted into a courtroom. And I don't mean a makeshift table and chairs. I mean a full mock-up. There was a raised bench, a witness stand, a jury box filled with empty chairs, and flags. Not American flags. Whisper Ridge flags. A gold crest on a field of deep forest green. And there she was, Evelyn Sterling. She sat behind the bench in a suit that probably cost more than my first car, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, staring down at me with eyes that were cold, dead, and utterly convinced of her own divinity. "Thomas Jack Miller," she announced, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "You stand accused of aesthetic insubordination, financial delinquency, and disrupting the harmony of the Ridge. How do you plead?" I stood there, swaying slightly, letting the fear wash over my face while my eyes scanned the room. For guards. 2 exits. 1 surveillance camera in the corner with a blinking red light. I don't understand," I stammered. "I just want to go home. Please, Mrs. Sterling, I'll paint the house. I'll paint it whatever color you want." She smiled, and it was the ugliest thing I'd ever seen. "It's too late for paint, Mr. Miller. Compliance is a mindset, not a color. We need to assess your assets to cover the fines and the administrative costs of your extraction." She gestured to Brutus. "Search his belongings. Secure his electronics. We need access to his accounts." Brutus dumped my bag onto the evidence table. He pulled out my wallet, my keys, and then the laptop. "The honeypot." "No," I shouted, lurching forward, making it look like panic. "Please, not the computer. My whole life is on there. Don't open it." It was the perfect bait. If I had stayed silent, they might have ignored it. But by begging, I guaranteed they would look. "Open it," Sterling ordered, her eyes gleaming with the prospect of discovering my secrets. Brutus flipped the lid open. The screen woke up, and somewhere in a van 10 miles away, a technician whispered, "We're in." The moment that laptop connected to their local Wi-Fi to search for updates, it injected a payload of spyware that spread through their network like a virus, copying files, logging keystrokes, activating cameras. They were hacking themselves, and they were smiling while they did it. "Take him to the interview room," Sterling said, bored now. "I'll join you shortly to discuss the transfer of deed." The interview room. That was code for the basement. That was code for pain. They marched me down a flight of stone stairs, the air getting colder, the smell of mildew and bleach replacing the scent of lavender and money. The room was soundproofed, egg crate foam on the walls, a single metal chair bolted to the floor, and a drain in the center of the concrete. You don't put a drain in a room unless you expect fluids. Brutus shoved me into the chair, and the 2 stooges moved to secure my legs. The door clicked shut, locking us in. "Now," Brutus said, cracking his knuckles, "let's talk about that attitude of yours." He reached for a baton on his belt. I took a deep breath, let the Jack Miller mask dissolve, and let Agent Kane step into the light. "You know," I said, my voice dropping that wavering tremble, becoming steady, hard, and flat. "You guys really need to work on your badge placement. It's embarrassing." Brutus paused, frowning. "What? And the zip ties?" I continued, looking down at my wrists. "You left way too much slack." I snapped my wrists outward. The plastic shattered with a loud crack. Before the sound had even faded, I was moving. I exploded out of the chair, driving my shoulder into Brutus's solar plexus. It was like hitting a wall, but a wall that needed to breathe. He doubled over, gasping, and I spun, sweeping the leg of Officer Duffy, sending him crashing into the metal table. The third guy, the short one, fumbled for his taser, his eyes wide as saucers, realizing that the old man was suddenly moving with the speed of a viper. I didn't give him the chance. I closed the distance, grabbed his wrist, twisted until the cartilage popped, and slammed him into the soundproof foam. 8 seconds. That's all it took. 3 men on the floor, groaning, writhing, and me standing in the center of the room, adjusting my flannel shirt. I reached into the hidden pocket at the small of my back, pulled out the leather folio, and flipped it open. The gold shield caught the harsh fluorescent light. "Special Agent, FBI," I stated, the words hanging in the silence. "You are all under arrest for kidnapping a federal officer, conspiracy to commit extortion, and being really, really bad at your jobs." I pulled my sat phone, hit the panic button, and spoke 3 words: "Execute. Execute. Execute." Above us, the world ended. I heard the thump, thump, thump of rotors first, Then the shattering of glass as flashbangs went off in the main hall. The heavy thud of battering rams hitting the front doors reverberated through the stone foundation. I handcuffed Brutus to the drain pipe. He wasn't going anywhere, and ran up the stairs, my service weapon drawn now, clearing the corners like I was back at Quantico. When I burst into the courtroom, it was chaos. Federal agents in tactical gear were pouring through the windows, lasers cutting through the dust. Sterling was standing behind her bench, frantically typing on a tablet, screaming, "You have no jurisdiction. I am the president. This is private property." I walked up the center aisle, past the overturned chairs and the cowering jury members who were realizing their civic duty had just become a RICO case. Sterling looked up, saw me, saw the badge, and her face went from rage to a pale, hollow shock. She looked at the screen of her tablet, where she was trying to delete the server archives, but the screen was locked. A giant FBI seal was rotating on the display. "It's already backed up, Evelyn," I said, climbing the steps to the bench. "Every email, every transaction, every video of you terrorizing these people. We have it all. We've had it for 20 minutes. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling for the first time. "You're just a retired actuary. You're nobody." "I'm the guy you shouldn't have messed with," I said, and I watched as the reality of her life collapsed. The realization that the mansions, the power, the fear she cultivated, it was all over. An agent moved in, spun her around, and the sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest music I've ever heard. "Vivian Evelyn Blackwood Sterling," the agent recited, "you are under arrest for federal racketeering, wire fraud, kidnapping." The list went on, a litany of her sins. They walked her out past the cameras. The news crews had arrived, tipped off by the Bureau's press office, and the look on her face as she was shoved into the back of a real law enforcement vehicle was worth every second of playing the victim. She looked small. She looked old. She looked like exactly what she was, a bully who finally picked a fight she couldn't win. The raid lasted 6 hours. We seized assets totaling $12 million, cars, cash, artwork, and a vault full of gold bars she'd been hoarding in the panic room. We found the files on every resident, the blackmail folders, the fake legal documents. It was an empire of dirt, and we bulldozed it. But the best part? The best part wasn't the arrest. It wasn't the commendation I got from the director. It was waking up the next morning. I walked out onto my porch with a fresh cup of coffee, hot this time, and looked down the valley. The black SUVs were gone. The fake patrols were gone. I saw Mr. Henderson 2 cabins down, an old guy who used to hide inside with the curtains drawn. He was out on his lawn, setting up a hideous, bright pink flamingo. He saw me, waved, and yelled, "Approved aesthetic, right?" I laughed, raised my mug, and yelled back, "Looks beautiful to me, Gary." Whisper Ridge changed after that. The new board is boring. They argue about snow removal budgets and whether the community pool needs a new filter. It's mundane, it's bureaucratic, and it is absolutely wonderful because it's free. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night, the thing I want you to really think about. Evelyn Sterling didn't start out as a monster. She started as a volunteer. She started as someone who just wanted to keep the neighborhood nice. But power, unchecked, unmonitored, absolute power in a closed system, it rots people. It turns keeping the grass cut into destroying lives. And the scariest part wasn't her. It was the people who went along with it. The Sheilas, the Doofies, the neighbors who closed their blinds when they saw the SUV coming because they were just glad it wasn't coming for them. So I have to ask you, where's the line in your neighborhood? When does enforcing the rules turn into tyranny? And if a black SUV pulled up to your neighbor's house at 9 a.m., would you close the blinds? Or would you be the one to stand up and ask to see a warrant? Because let me tell you, from personal experience, the bad guys are banking on you closing those blinds. Don't give them the satisfaction. Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever dealt with an HOA that felt like a mafia? I read every single one of them. Stay safe out there, watch your six, and never, ever let them tell you what color to paint your freedom. This is Jack, signing off.